Hey, this is Royce Hall, your host of the Coffee Dreamin podcast. I'm a Salesforce consultant by day and podcaster by night. And today I'm joined by Mikel Lindsaar. Mikel is the founder of StoreConnect. And in this episode, we discuss e-commerce, the importance of retaining humanity in sales and operations, and the uncomfortable truth behind scope creep. I hope you enjoy the episode. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And Mikel, you are the founder of StoreConnect. That's how I know you. You're also an author and doing lots of great things. So I'd love to focus a little bit on what you're doing with StoreConnect. Can you give us maybe like the 30-second elevator pitch for what you're doing with StoreConnect?
Yeah, fundamentally, the best way to think of StoreConnect is one of my clients actually told me this. He goes, StoreConnect's really the best bits of Shopify and WordPress built completely within Sales Cloud. And I went, oh my God, what a great tagline. But there's no way the lawyers will let me use it because it's got like 4 trademarks in like 3 sentences or 3 trademarks. So yeah, we build an app exchange product. Your listeners will probably be familiar with the app exchange. It's Salesforce's app store effectively for business apps. And you can install StoreConnect within your Salesforce environment and launch your website. So instead of having a separate Shopify site and a separate WordPress website and a separate blogging website and a separate this website, you can memberships and donations and subscriptions. You can just bring that all into Sales Cloud and just have one place to manage all of that. And that's what StoreConnect does. It really just simplifies business operations so that you're not paying humans to get computers to talk to computers.
Yeah, I love that. And, we think of Salesforce and, it's supposed to be kind of the center of gravity for your business. And, that app exchange is so vital for making that happen because there's so many things that Salesforce, either they do well for like a very robust business. So like you think of like Commerce Cloud, and it's like, okay, that's like a huge investment, and that not everybody has that. So how do you give those of us who are smaller the keys to the kingdom as well, and
Yeah, that's
unlocking
right.
that is fantastic. And if you're
Yeah.
a lawyer that's listening, don't sue us for all the things that Mikel just said.
Look, to balance it a little bit, Shopify and WordPress are fantastic tools. And Shopify is the go-to e-commerce product in the market for a reason. WordPress is the go-to website blogging platform for a reason, right? It's not that they're bad products. The challenge is more once you build that site and you get it up and running, and now you need to launch a second brand or a B2B store, or you need to create a separate website with a company that you're doing a co-marketing launch with, that's where those products and platforms start hitting the limits. And some of your listeners may have run into this where they've built their e-commerce site or their website, and now they want to do something slightly out of the box, something that's not really built into that core platform. I had a really simple example just a few weeks ago with a client. They wanted to capture and display to the user how many years they've been a member of this platform and display that in a certain way to the end user and not have it all done in the browser and JavaScript and stuff. But they wanted that data from their Salesforce environment presented to the user. Now, the challenge with that is not whether or not you can sort of jerry rig it on Shopify. You probably could, but you want to get that data properly in Salesforce. So say it's their, member since date. You actually want that as a date record in Salesforce so you can report off it. Well, StoreConnect then lets you take that actual field and just publish it on the website and allow them to edit and come back to it. So StoreConnect basically mirrors all of your data in Salesforce. It's not built separately with a synchronization tool that runs once a day or a couple of times a day, and you end up with all these conflicts and errors. It's actually reading and writing that data and that data model directly. And that's really where the benefits come in. You start to be able to do all sorts of amazing things with that.
Yeah. Well, Michael, you clearly have a lot of expertise in the e-commerce world. You mentioned, obviously you're the founder of StoreConnect, and you mentioned that you've written a book. You're writing, I think, another book. You're either writing or you're about to publish. So you clearly have expertise and passion around that. Can you share with me, what? Can you share me with me kind of the Simon Sinek, why behind what you're doing? Like what drives you to this?
Yeah. How did I end up in this mess? No. StoreConnect's a really interesting product in that we're trying to offer a affordable, accessible solution that can scale to small to medium businesses that are looking to grow, right? If you're a small business and you're making candles in the kitchen and you don't have world domination plans, you just want to run your candle shop or your t-shirt business or whatever, you've got one currency, you're not looking at doing lots and lots and lots of sales or building out your back office and stuff, all the existing e-commerce tools are perfect for you. But one of the things that I noticed, I was running a consulting company and we built custom web applications for people on top of Salesforce. That's what we did for a living. And we still do. That company is called Reinteractive. We build websites, mobile apps, all Salesforce connected, all highly custom, 100% custom code type stuff. And about 7 or 8 years ago now, I kept getting approached by clients saying, hey, can you build us an e-commerce website? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll take you $300,000, but why aren't you using Shopify, right? Like it was a really bizarre thing to be asked because I personally considered e-commerce as a solved problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it is from the end customer point of view, right? Displaying products, doing a checkout, placing an order, checking status. There is 1,000,001 tools out there that can do all of that. What I realized is the reason they were asking me, because I asked them, was it wasn't the front end that was the problem. It was how do you run the business on the back end? And I really saw a gap in the market where everyone was optimizing on the front end, which is a good target. It's a good thing to make it easier to buy things.
Sure.
But forgetting that you actually make your profit on how efficiently you can deliver that product. So how easily can your staff look up the product when someone calls you on the phone, update the order status, integrate with 1,001 different APIs that you need to integrate with, present custom information screens, reporting dashboards, all of this sort of stuff. And I went, you know what's really good at doing that stuff? That's Salesforce. There isn't really anything that you can modify to the extent that you can Salesforce and bend it to the flow of your business as opposed to you having to change your business to fit in with HubSpot or Monday or something else. And I went, what if we built Shopify and WordPress and a point of sale system on top of Salesforce directly? Because then our clients can modify Salesforce to do what they need it to do in order to run their business and make their staff more efficient while providing a really good e-commerce experience for their end customers. And that's really the journey of how we got here. 8 years compressed down into like 30 seconds. It was a real process of finding those gaps and those inefficiencies in a business. There's a lot of companies out there if you go look at various websites about, BigCommerce and Shopify and all these things, quite often you'll see blog posts of like the top 25 plugins you need to use for Shopify, right? That These are the 15 must-have add-ons and plugins you need to run an efficient Shopify business. That's all well and good, but understand that that's 15 different software subscriptions, 15 different security risks, 15 different upgrade paths, 15 different compromises on this thing doesn't actually quite do what I want, but it does about 90% of it. And you keep taking 90% multiplied out of 90% by 90% by 90%. you get to a point where your site does about 10% of what you need it to do, because you've got all these compromises. That's where StoreConnect and Salesforce really shine. You can actually go in and modify it to do exactly what you want it to do and gain back that efficiency. So that's how we got here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've shared with you, like, I love coffee. I have my own like small coffee business. I have like my WordPress site and everything. And
Coffee
I know
Dreamin. We're gonna migrate you to StoreConnect.
Hey, let's do it. Let's do it. And that I identify with that of like, okay, I've got all these plugins to do all sorts of different things, and like some of them are outdated. I'm like, I don't even have time to think about replacing that. Like, I've got so many other irons in the fire, and to have that, connecting that, like you said, like I got into it for the front end of like I just need it to be visible because like there's no back end operations if there's no front end sales.
That's right.
But now it's like I got the back end problem, and to your point of like, okay, I think about security of like, oh crap, like what is this plugin actually doing to me? Like, is there a security breach there or whatever? And to have the assurance of like Salesforce is manning that, right? They're manning their own security. They're taking care of that because they're enterprise software. That really makes like, I'm not thinking of scaling too much. I'm selling to my friends and family and whatever. But like if I were to scale that, I'm like, I got a lot of problems.
Yeah, and you hit two really good points there: security and scalability. On the security aspect, I think it was early last year, there was a Shopify plugin that had a security breach on their, AWS instance and leaked all of the customer information of, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 Shopify stores. Like, just think with that, right?
Yeah.
These Shopify plugins are high value targets for hackers because quite often what happens when you install a plugin in any e-commerce system, I don't want to pick on Shopify. As I've said, Shopify is a fantastic product. And the challenge that they have, and anyone has with third-party plugins, especially on their platform, is quite often the plugin will go, well, you know what? The plugin author quite often will go, well, you know what? We calculate, some sort of sales aspect of the business, right? We pre-calculate a field that we save on that customer record. So quite often they'll go, we pre-calculate a field that we save on that customer record. And instead of just taking the small amount of data they need, they just take a full copy of the database and put it on their own Amazon instance, and then they're querying that and they synchronize it back and forward and all this sort of stuff. And that's a task of expediency. They've got features they need to build. They don't want to restrict themselves in what they need access to, because if they need to change that, they need to ask you permission, and then different clients will say no. And so many of these e-commerce stores have copies of their database scattered across multiple other software companies. And this is a real challenge for security, because you might have heard of SOC 2 compliance or ISO 27001. You try and search for ISO 27001 or SOC 2 compliance for Shopify, and you won't find a lot, because the only way to actually achieve that would be for every plugin that you use to be SOC 2 compliant. And that's just not going to happen. It's expensive to do that, right? And some of these plugins might be side hustles for people. So StoreConnect's able, because we're built on that Salesforce Trust platform, our whole package is SOC 2 compliant. When you launch a StoreConnect store, it's SOC 2 compliant. We're about a week away from actually receiving our certification for ISO 27001. We just passed the audit with 0 findings, which we were pretty happy about. So ISO 27001, SOC 2. We're also GDPR compliant out of the box, and we're about to get our HIPAA compliance, which is one of the hardest ones to get. So there's this very powerful aspect of building on top of that trust platform, like you said, and having all that data within the Salesforce trust model and ecosystem. The second thing you touched on was scalability. If you're building website, you've got your Shopify site and your WordPress site, or your BigCommerce site, or your, whatever WooCommerce website, and it's sort of hanging together, and you don't have any back office tooling. And suddenly you manage to get a coffee that you sell, which is absolutely amazing and goes viral for whatever reason. The time that you don't want to do a re-platform onto a system that can scale is when you're going viral and scaling, right?
Right.
You don't want to be having jumped off the cliff, falling down the side, trying to build the aeroplane as you go. And we've had clients that have actually just started their business on StoreConnect. I mean, you can get running on StoreConnect, including all the Salesforce licenses you need to do it. You know, maybe a couple of Salesforce licenses plus base copy of StoreConnect for less than 500 US a month, which is incredible. And that platform can scale all the way to 100 million, 200 million, $500 million a year of transactions. So from that whole journey from nothing to $1 billion company on e-commerce, you wouldn't have to do a re-platform for the entire growth period. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, Michael, you mentioned a minute ago that you compressed, I think, 8 years of development down to like 30 seconds.
Yes.
Maybe let's unpack that a little bit more. One of the things that I like to ask my guests is, take a couple of maybe 2-3 key findings, key lessons that you learned along the way, and distill those down for me. I'd love to kind of hear what you've learned in the process of either you've built multiple businesses, you're a multi-time founder, both in like consulting but also SaaS. You're an author. There's a lot there to share. I'd love to get kind of a few kind of pivotal thoughts from you.
Yeah, sure. I think there's two aspects to business. I don't think this is groundbreaking in any way, but fundamentally you've got your team that is the business, and you've got your customers that work with your business, right? And for any company to thrive, both sides of that coin need to be doing well. Your team needs to be excited about what they're doing, on purpose, want to create, know what they're doing, clear direction. But your clients also need to have an understanding of your business. They need to feel like they've been treated fairly or better than fairly. They want to have a seamless interaction with you. But I think most importantly in the modern day, they want a human connection of some sort. And this is what my book, Customer Commerce, is about. It'll be released fairly soon. I'm threatening to get it released. It's been a busy time trying to write it and get it all done. But the first chapter of it's called Be Human. And you'll notice that in the world these days, the companies that are appreciated the most have human responses to any challenges that come up. And people actually are starting to really appreciate that. Gone are the days where, corporate speak or corporate filtered PR speak is the right way to go about something. People want a little bit quirky, a little bit human, a little bit funny. Or if that's not your brand, brotherly or statesmanlike or whatever. But they want genuine. They want a communication from humans. And I think this is going to become more and more important as we move into the AI age. There's going to be time and places to use an agent and an AI tooling. But at the same time, sometimes you just want to talk to someone or you need to communicate with someone. And I think that's a really important aspect of growing any business is, just fundamentally be human. Try and create a human touch, because that's what humans can do better than any AI tooling. So I think that's a really important thing. And you can run that be human aspect on both sides of that coin. With your staff and your team, you need to be human. You need to empathize with them and understand where they're going. And if they make a mistake, the best way to, my mum used to say, when you point the finger at someone, 3 of those fingers are pointing back at you, right? Because more often than not, the reason someone on your team made a mistake is they misduplicated what you asked for, or you didn't communicate what you asked for really, or there is no policy that covers that. And that's what my other book, True Team, is all about. It's how you create a team of individuals that work together and get things done and build a successful business. So I think that would be my number one tip, is be human. And if you can do that across all of your channels, all of your marketing, all of your sales, just be human. Don't try and force everyone into a very perfectly defined funnel, or if you need to use a perfectly defined funnel, at the first opportunity, break out and get into that human conversation and build that relationship. And I think over the years, building relationships is going to be the number one sales point. You know, everyone's getting tired of the relentless emails that are coming into them. It's going to be, the differentiation is going to be people that actually build relationships.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that is a uniquely human element, and until we have bots buying from other bots, like that's going to be, that's going to be important for every sales channel, because I'm not selling to a bot. Even if I'm trying to sell with a bot, it's a person that's typically signing off on
That's
that.
right.
So,
And people miss this in B2B. One of the funny things that we found is that B2C know this, and they try and build that relationship with that human. B2B, it's always like, oh, but I'm selling to a business. You're really not. You're selling to Josephine, who's been tasked, in my case, to go and buy an e-commerce platform. She's never done that before in her entire life. She'll probably never do it again in her entire career. It's the first time she's ever even looked at the App Exchange, and she's only doing it because her boss has said, I need this done this quarter because we need to solve sales, right? Like anyone, she's in a position of like, if I screw this up, do I still have a job? There's a lot of fear and there's uncertainty in a situation where they've never dealt with it. And it doesn't matter who you are. When you're buying software for your company, it's usually the only time, or maybe the second time, you'll ever or have ever done that, or anything for your company. You buy things generally once. You might replace them, or you might, but by the time you replace it, years have gone past, the whole market's different. So you got to be human. You got to have that relationship and talk to the customer, because there is a customer at the end of that conversation, rightly said.
Yeah. And, I think that's something that, I try to impress with my team as well, is when you're having those conversations, like you said, like you're probably only having that once. Like they want to install the e-commerce and then not touch it for a very long time, if ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, I'm going to purchase Salesforce and we're going to get that up and running, and I just want it to work, because it's going to take a lot of time and resources. And neither client for us wants to be a full-time CRM builder or full-time e-commerce builder. They just want those tools to work for their business. So we have to, I think, remind ourselves, remind our teams, of that human on the other side. Like, they've never bought this before, they've never installed this before, so you have to lead them through that. And I think when we lose sight of that, that's when we end up getting scope creep and all those terrible things, because you have to remember, they're not the pros at buying software. They're not the pros at buying e-commerce. They're not the pros at setting it up. So you have to supply that, and you have to lead them through that process. And sometimes that means just saying, like, in a very human way, like, you don't want to do that. Like, what you're asking me is a really bad idea.
Yeah,
because they don't know.
Scope creep sucks, and it's really hard to handle, but it's also inevitable. I think if you're planning to do projects with no scope creep, then I've got bad news for you. Unless you're selling literally a coffee on the side of the street, and you're selling a latte, and someone buys a latte, and that's it. Unless you're selling a very, very transactional project, any project will have scope creep. And a bit of a controversial statement, scope creep, the more scope creep there is the higher indication of lack of project management by the consultant selling it. Because it's very rare really, there are cases, but it's very rare that the client just changes their mind. That doesn't happen that often. Usually, the reason for scope creep is the client had a set of assumptions on how something was going to work before the project even started, and the project team who are delivering it didn't understand what those requirements were or what those assumptions were. So the project team are going in one direction with a set of assumptions, the client's going in another direction with a set of assumptions, and very quickly those two paths are diverging, and the gap between those paths is what is then labeled scope creep as a way to put the responsibility back onto the client, right? I'm not saying the client shouldn't pay. I'm not saying that at all. But scope creep is almost a definition that was invented by project managers to blame clients for lack of discovery, I think. And while it's still a valid thing, and while you still need to handle it, and there is no world in which you would ever be able to do a perfect discovery session, because we're humans and we have assumptions that are assumptions because we assume that you know what they are, so we're not going to talk about them. So you really have to tease out as much as you can. But instead, the way to approach that is be human, right? Go into it from a viewpoint of, there are going to be things that we don't know here that aren't worked out. Like in all of our statement of works, we have a section in there that goes, look, we will accept up to a 10% change in scope on this project, or a 5%, depending on how big the project is. And we'll try and accommodate any scope changes as we go, because we understand that we haven't found everything out yet, right? But if there's material stuff that's different, well, yeah, we're going to have a discussion about that and work out, well, that's going to take X amount of work, and let's do it together, and let's budget that in and make it happen. But I think the scope creep thing is an interesting one, and I would challenge project managers to look at scope creep from a different name, maybe. And I'm thinking about this now, but maybe instead of calling it scope creep, call it failed discovery. And I think that puts it into the correct light and opens up an opportunity to do something about it, right? The problem with scope creep is there's nothing you can do about it. It's like, well, we have scope creep. Okay, how do we fix that next time? Let's just not have scope creep next time. It's like, you can't do that. That's not in your control. But if you call it failed discovery, you can go, okay, what questions didn't we ask that created this situation where we have a failed discovery? Oh, we could ask A, B, and C. Okay, good. Let's put that into our discovery call next time. And now next time you might not have that scope creep or failed discovery. And that's a really powerful thing.
Well, I challenge anybody listening to this to put failed discovery on a SOW and try to build that. So, no,
absolutely.
That's a good point, though. Like, it always that's a great point. Like, it always takes two to tango, right? Like, the point of the failed discovery is ownership on the consulting side of, okay, did we actually, like, again, this person has never bought consulting before.
That's right.
They're not going to know how to answer a question, so we have to make sure that we get the questions answered. And, there's still going to be, like, I got my PMP many, many years ago, and one of my favorite things is the unknown. Like, there's got to be that bucket of, like, we just don't know, but we have to make sure that we get into that bucket as soon as possible.
And to be clear, while it's the responsibility of doing that discovery, it's also a two-way street, right? Like, the client is part of that discovery process, and the blame doesn't only sit on the shoulders of the consultants, but the consultants are in the best position to control it and do something about it. And I think that's the key aspect. And the other thing around this is, if you have a good client, they're well aware of the fact that if they're not paying you and you live on paid consulting hours, you're going to end up focusing on other clients that are paying them, and their quality of life is going to crash. So with good clients, you can have clear conversations and get things built and create things. And when you find gaps, you talk it through and figure out how to solve it and say, well, we can build that, but let's put this into phase 2 so that we actually get launched, and be human.
Yeah, I love it. And that scope creep, like, the other part of that, what you just said is it doesn't have to be scope creep. It could just be phase 2, right? Like,
Yeah, that's
we
right.
found something that doesn't fit in that we all agree would be fantastic. And I think in a like agile software development world, like that happens of like, oh well, just none of us thought about that, right? Until we're
Yep.
halfway in, we're like, hey, we should do X. Well,
Yeah,
we'll
and
add
either
that to the
X can be
backlog.
done now and something else move into phase 2, or we'll do X in phase 2.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, that's a really important aspect of building any project is time to live. Time to the point where you can start actually generating revenue out of this thing, or saving money, or saving time. They're the 3 main reasons that people do anything in this world. In business, you're either going to make money with it, you're going to save money with it, or you're going to make time or save time. Sorry, I said 3 because the first one's money, the second one's money, and the third one is or increase status, right? Improve your station or something like that, which is quite often how a fashion brand sells its product. It's not going to save you time, it's not going to make you money, but it's going to increase your status or your happiness, that sort of thing. So they're the 3 main reasons why people buy things. So you want to get the product to that point as fast as possible, so that the client's getting a return on investment on whatever project they've done with you, regardless of what it is.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for sharing with me today. Thank you for sharing these insights. It's been a great conversation. And
No worries.
if somebody wants to find you, somebody says, "Wow, like StoreConnect is it?" Like, where do we go to find you? And are you like doing any sort of promotion or anything that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on LinkedIn quite thoroughly. Mikel Lindsaar, spelt funny, Mikel Lindsaar. We have the Customer Commerce podcast that you can tune into. We've been doing it for about a year now. It's been a lot of fun. We talk about all things commerce related and running businesses in this modern, crazy, crazy world. And my book, True Team, which is available on Amazon.
Fantastic. So there you go. Check out Michael across multiple platforms. Pick up your book, and thank you so much for sharing with us. And one more question: how do we get that little fluffy creature behind you over your left shoulder?
This is Steve. Steve is our Tasmanian devil mascot of StoreConnect. We called him Steve because it was the most Australian name we could come up with. He's got a nice hoodie. He's pretty cool. All of our StoreConnect customers get a Steve, and our partners that get a StoreConnect client live also get a Steve and a little care box of Australian goodies. So Steve's amazing. He's well traveled. He's gone around the world many, many times now. But yeah, little hoodie back.
Fantastic. Well, I love it. Taz, the Tasmanian devil, the Looney Tune character, was always my favorite. So I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, we figured Steve was a bit more, yeah, he's Steve. He's a good guy.
I love it. Well, thanks again, Michael. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, Royce.
Thank you.